Gonna thank all the members for coming today. Thank existing members, new members of the board, and the past members. The past members couldn't come today. So, but we did get 4 for a quorum. So why don't you introduce yourself to the board, Mark, and Brian, or
Kevin and
Kevin and Brian.
I'm Kevin Bartram. I'm an architect at MBA Architects in Fargo. Had a weak moment and decided to join the board. So this will be talking to Brian on the way, and it'll be good. It'll be entertaining. It'll be we'll learn a lot, and it'll be a good process to go through. So happy to be here.
I'm Brian Berg with Zerberg Architects, and glad to serve on the board, and looking forward to the next code cycle and going through the process of the review. And I know that that's a labor-intensive process, and it's an important process, and glad to be a part of it. So,
Well, thanks for joining our board. I'll do a little intro to the Board of Appeals for the new members. And maybe you can, Gretchen, send them a copy of the bylaws in an email. Why don't you send it to everybody, refresh, and you can check that out. The Board of Appeals has 2 major functions. The first one is the appeals to the codes. Any appeal that is made to our department will come through this board, and you'll end up hearing that appeal. And the other, like Brian said, the other is the code adoption process. The 2021 codes have started to be produced. I think we did get one of the books already, and the other ones I asked, and they did tell me it should be out in October. So when those are produced and we can purchase them, we usually do purchase the first edition copy, and you will each get a complete set of the codes. So Clay, why don't you go ahead and start the meeting now?
We'll bring the meeting to order. Our first thing to do is approve the minutes of the October 3rd, 2019 meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the
David's made a motion. Do we have a second?
I guess I'll second that. We weren't there, but if you need it for official business here,
No.
I did read through them. So
It was actually a pretty decent meeting. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Bruce, do we have any unfinished business to discuss?
No unfinished.
Okay. New business, we have election of officers. And we need to elect a chair and a vice chair, I believe. Anybody has a motion for those?
I would like to make a motion to maintain the same people that are chairpersons right now.
Okay,
Do that.
certainly can.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
A motion is approved. Staff reports.
Okay, I already mentioned the new codes coming out in 2021. We will be ordering those as soon as possible. We've had some discussion about the process. It has taken a lot of time in the past. We review each book and we present code changes to the board. It's taken us, after we get the book's already a year old. It's 2020, we'll get it 2021. We'll review it. We usually started mid of the next year and then adopted 2022. So we were always behind. we had an ISO evaluation last year, and we got docked for being behind. But at that point, they only review every 4 or 5 years. We were in the 2018 and it was 2020. We were behind, or we were in the 15 and it was like 19. And so we were too far behind and they docked us for the code. And I was conflicted on that in that they only come every 4 or 5 years and it doesn't land on code cycles. So it didn't really work out. We did get the adoption, we sent it to them, and they did accept that. So we're looking at speeding up the process, getting the books, getting to the Board of Appeals faster. I don't know if we can have more meetings in the time period, but not stretch it out for 8 or 9 months. Just try and do it faster. The state of North Dakota follows our process. And we think if we get done sooner, then the state might get done sooner. We're trying to get done 8 months to a year earlier, then they can adopt quicker, and then the whole state will be under the same code faster. So we'll look at that, and as soon as we get the books, we'll work on the schedule, and we'll set some out to you, see what you think about the schedule.
So you're putting the stress of being responsible for the entire state codes being adopted earlier on us?
It's always been done that way, and I don't have all the history ever since we've been involved. Chris and I, that's how it's been. We get ours done, and then the state starts theirs, because we spend a lot of time and we do a lot of amendments. We actually present all our amendments to the state. We go through the same thing again. This time I'm on the state board for the code committee. I'll be on the next one probably. And so we talked about that also, because a lot of jurisdictions have issues with ISO. Getting docked for one, and a code is a big one. You get docked a lot of points. And we were docked, I believe, I still haven't heard the final numbers, that we're back to what we were before, but in that, I told them their period is 4 or 5 years. I think they shrunk it by a year. And then we do things to change within months of our interview. They don't give us credit for some of that. I said, how can you come every 4 or 5 years and not look at a 4 or 5 year period? Some back maybe, some forward. So we've had issues, and a lot of jurisdictions did, so we're just trying to get that done faster for everybody.
Bruce, I think it is important that we take the time to thoroughly review that new code. So even though we may have got some pushback from them, I wouldn't want to adopt a code that we haven't taken the time to thoroughly review, because bad code's, worse than no code, or going off the old, in my opinion. But so speeding it up is great, but still having a thorough job, I think, is more important than that.
A little background: when I did my very first presentation to the Board of Appeals, IBC in section 7 to 11, I think I just did what I thought was most important changes to the code. And then a couple members said, what about this one? What about that one? Because the bars, they're looking at the same book, they see bars, and some of them are full barred pages of changes. I had to say those were insignificant changes. The next time I did mine, I did every one. And the meeting took 4 times longer. So we make some decisions of significant or insignificant to bring to the board. You still get the books, you still can look at everyone that's in there. And we also get training from IBC. We try and get that done before we come here so that we know, because they'll give us significant changes too. But we won't change that process. We'll just try and speed it up. Maybe start it quicker and maybe have the schedule a little tighter. Still have the meeting.
So when you review the changes that are barred in the code, and you decide whether or not to agree with those changes, what happens if you decide not to? So what happens if there's a modification, a local modification to the code? What's the process for approval of that?
Oh, very good question. So when we present, we will also present are amendments. So we look at each amendment that we had previously. Many amendments that we've made that corrected the code end up in the code later. So then we do not need to amend. But we'll also recommend or do our recommendations for amendments to the current code. So you'll get to hear those at the time. Issues come up during the process. We make note of that and we keep a schedule. We work on that. So it may be we're talking about the International Mechanical Code 1 week. At the end of the meeting, you still have the option to bring up other ones that you saw or heard previously. So we keep a running tally. By the end of the meeting, we've worked all those issues out. At the board, anybody can present amendments. Anybody in the industry, any citizen, anybody can come here to present amendments. So we do our part. You can create amendments. In fact, if we have amendments, you can look at them and suggest changes, revisions, or an amendment. Dave's brought up some in the past. And we look at different code sections with previous code, current code, future code. Dave gets his hand on the next code book and sees a change. He's asked for modifications. So that process goes through the 104 process for modifications, but that could be in there permanently if we do it enough times. So we look at all the issues that come up and document them. And that's what we do at the state, is pretty much we present our amendments to the state.
So that amendment document is basically a memo that comes from the code office that says here are the changes that are.
Yes. When at the final meeting, all issues should be resolved and documented. All the amendments should be written up in the final form. And then I'll ask for a final motion to present those to commission. They go to commission and that becomes our code document. We keep that at our front desk. We hand that out. It's online. I've asked staff, and they did a really good job last year, to look at the code with the intent of not amending. It's so much easier when you're the same as other jurisdictions. And so there are changes that have made. One is the code changed the no permit required for 120 square feet to 200 square feet. Staff decided to leave it at 120. We amended it to 120. We'll look at it again this year. And I think that there's always more bigger permits. So I look at it like, did the rest of the world change to 200? Is it time we change to 200? That was presented to the board last time. So we'll look at all those. Again, and then the next item, we're going to consider revisions to the bylaws because we're meeting on 4th of July weekend and majority came from the lake. We're going to look at amending the bylaws, see if we can change that to another week in another month or later in the month. And we can do that next time since you're here and functioning. The past members couldn't make it, so we won't do that presentation, and that's all I have today.
I have a question.
Yep.
We did, the last codes meeting was a pretty interesting meeting. Could you just give a short synopsis of what ended up happening with Mr. Watkins?
Yes, I did think about that. It did go on quite a long time after that, and it still might be going on. I don't meet with James every day, but for some reason I was called to an inspection sometime this spring, and I actually went down into that space. We had the placard on. It still was not complete. So the owner had decided to let things sit unused. There's other issues in the building. He was applying for permits on 2 or 3 different other spaces in that building. So we had held permits until he took care of this issue. When we went down there, there was only one remaining issue, and that was a ventilation fan for a bathroom. And he still did not want to do that at the time. You can just guess what the issues are, masonry walls, and so you could get a permit. We told him we could get a permit for that today. We'll write the permit, and then you can go off on your other permits and get it done. So I know it's moved forward. I haven't heard anything after that meeting in the basement. He did put the inspector put some stipulations on the use, because the wood shop was not being used, but it was still there. That had to be removed. I think that was the only other issue. But he is working on other spaces. The Diva on the corner, I think he's remodeling that now. And one other little one in the back.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything further? Hearing none, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion and a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.